Alright, in this last of this three-part tutorial, we're going to finish modeling the character. In the first part we covered how to do the head, and how to model the head and get the correct geometry. And the second part we did the body, which was more or less not containing the armor and accessories. And so this third part we're going to finish up with the armor and accessories. I'm going to try and speed through this so it doesn't take too long. The first two videos were pretty more in-depth on how to actually do things. This one, assuming you know the concepts of Maya and how to model and all that. So I'm gonna show you what I did and explain how it got to there versus actually step by step going through and building on the armor. So here we have the back of them and the front of them, and the remaining details like the wrinkles on the legs and the chest I'm going to do in ZBrush later, but I need to unwrap the UVs first. So we're going to finish modeling this and then do unwrapping and then do the ZBrush next, or after that. So for right now, let's finish up the modeling aspect. This is part 3 of the modeling. We're using Maya for this. And so for the modeling aspect, let's slide over, actually turn on the clothes that I already worked on. So right here, we left off with actually turn on the body. So we left off with the body looking like this. The body's pretty much in the right shape. We've already sculpted all the different parts of the body, the arms, the legs, the hands, and all that. So we have two options here. We can either add geometry to an existing character. Let's say I'll do that for the chest piece when I get to that. I'm going to be adding a chest piece. In this case, I can also sculpt clothes right into the current mesh. So either option would work. It all depends on what you're aiming for. Let's say you're going to have a t-shirt, you might as well just sculpt it into the geometry, so when your character squashes and stretches, it moves with him. But since this armor piece is a hard armor plate and it's not going to bend with him, I decided to make it a separate object so I can, on my paint weights, which is part of the rigging aspect later, it just works a little, I don't know, say easier, but being a separate object as it naturally would be a hard piece, whereas fabric is kind of almost glued to you, it bends with you. So for that respect, I decided to model anything that's close to the character and bending and squashing onto him, and anything hard surface that won't squash with him, I made that a separate object. Alright, so to start with, let me unfreeze that layer or unreference it. Alright, so I'll start with this guy. This is where we last left off with the basic body shape. If I press 1 on the keyboard, it goes back to the rough mode. 3 smooths it, so 1 on the keyboard back to basic mode. So to get this little, I guess not necessarily collar, but part of the shirt, I guess, it's pretty simple. It looks like it might take a little bit of work, but it's basically just adding an edge loop. So let's go to Edit Mesh, Insert Edge Loop. And I'll drop one really close up to the arm area. As we can see, it's kind of like really close up on there. I'm going to put this on shading, wireframe on shaded. Alright, there we go. This way it shows the blue outlines on all the geometry, so I don't have to actually click on them. Alright, so the next step is to go into here, and let's say, I guess edge mode. I'll take this edge, this one, oops. This one, and this one, and then I'll pull these edges forwards, and then let's take off Control, select those to pull those off, pull this forward, and then let's go to vertex mode, and grab just the top one, and pull that forward. Alright, and you can see here that it started pulling a collar out on it. If I press 3 on the keyboard, it starts to create a bit of a shape. 3 smooths it, so it really rounds off what we have. If we want to keep more of that edge, we're going to have to put an extra loop in there, and you can see I added one up there. I also cut an extra line into the surface here, so if I go to interactive split tool, I can cut one from here to here. I guess I'll go up here and this way and there. And there. Hopefully that works. Yep, awesome. Sometimes that tool gets really glitchy. Alright, let's try again. Let's click I'll start from here down to the corner. and that didn't work that time. Might be grabbing the wrong spot, so there to there. Alright, again, it's getting glitchy. It's just not the best tool. Alright, so that cut it. Edge, and delete out that edge. Alright, so now I can take this vertex and slide it. I'm going to go hold W and then hold left click, and I can pick normal average, and that means it'll slide across the surface a little easier. It makes it easier to control where it's going. And we do the same thing on this side. Hopefully it'll work. Alright, it would take a little playing around with it to get that to work. I just try to get the option to work. Hopefully my 2015 fixes that button. I know they replaced the button, so hopefully they fixed it. Alright, so the next step, we want to cut the geometry coming down that direction. So edit mesh, insert edge loop. Let's see if we can cut it down here. Yep, it cuts it. I don't necessarily need the extra line in there, so I'm going to go to edge, click this one, and then control, nope, hold shift, delete edge, and then vertex, merge vertices, that's holding the shift key, click and drag, pop, and drops that in place. And then I would do the same thing to the other side, but it didn't quite wrap around there anyway, so that's fine. Alright, and so that more or less created this. If I put this in 3 mode, you can see that it really sharpened that out and made a shoulder piece for him. And if I sharpen this one back in 3, you can see I got pretty much the same result. So it's super flaring out here, and if I wanted it to keep flaring out some more, I just keep pulling some of these and adding more edge loops and vertices in there. But that's pretty much all I need. Alright, so that's how I got that shoulder piece. The next part is the same exact process. How do we get the sleeves in here? We go add some more edge loops. So put that back on 1. Let's go edit mesh, insert edge loop. And let's say I put it right about here. And then we'll scale that really big. So double click on the line we just made, scale it somewhere about here. And then I'll move it, I guess, to about there. Double click on this one, scale, and kind of bolsters out the sleeve a little bit. And then one more thing before we slide, actually I guess I could just slide that back there. But I probably want to keep the extra line. Nope, I don't even have one right there. But I could keep an extra line if I wanted to. I could just go edit mesh, insert edge loop tool, and then go to move, and just push that backwards. And so now I have the sleeve. And when I go pressing 3 to smooth it, it kind of pops it out a little bit, so I probably want to put an extra loop in here, as I did right there. By putting the extra loop, it holds it a little better. So edit mesh, insert edge loop, pop one right there at the very edge. So now when I press 3, it holds the shape a lot better. And if I put another extra edge loop in there, it'll sharpen up the corner a lot better. So G to repeat the last command, slide another edge up near the last one, and you can see that it sharpened it a bit more, and I can keep playing around with that. But basically I'm sculpting the clothes right onto the existing mesh. And the same thing, repeat here, edge loop and extrude. Not extrude, but just squash and stretch, and I'll create that. So I'm going to skip making that part, but you get the idea. And then pulling vertice for vertice, trying to get the right shape and thickness, so it's a thicker arm guard than his arm naturally would be. Alright, jumping over here. I also twisted the vertices, so you can see here where it's coming kind of straight down to his hand, and now the same line, which is the middle of his I guess elbow, twist down to the middle of his hand, which is kind of normally how your bone would twist. So the benefit of twisting the arm right here is that later when his hand does twist back open, so it spins around, I guess clockwise or counterclockwise, the bending part here would be in line with the palm when they switch up. So that's as your hand naturally would be. If your hand was kind of completely out at a side, then you might have twisted some more. And when you do twist it in the animation, when you start rearranging, you could get some distortion. So I pre-curved it so that it would untwist. And to do that is basically just detaching the geometry and then twisting it around. So in other words, edit mesh, insert edge loop, put one right here, then go to face mode, and delete out these faces. So we're cutting a hole in the wrist. Alright, so that deletes out that, and so now I can reassign these wherever I want them to go. So vertex mode, select the vertex I want, and let's say this one over here, I want to be in the middle of his hand. So I can go hold down the shift key, hold down the right click, and go to merge vertex tool. So I click on that, and I say this one I want to go down there, and then just keep going. This one I want to go over to here, this one to here, and this one to here, this one to here, and there, and there, and there. Alright, so that twisted the whole geometry now. So if I double click on the edge right here, I can rotate this. Oops, not that direction. I guess orient the view this direction. I can use the outer ring, twist that a bit, and then repeat. Grab this one, twist that a little bit also, and you start to get that twist in there. Probably do a lot more finessing and playing with it to get the geometry to bend a little more accurately. But that looks pretty decent. You can see the line is curving down to the hand now. So eventually when he does take his hand and he does rotate his hand open, you can start to see that, okay, maybe not in edge mode, vertex mode. So when he does start to open his hands, you can see that it lines up. The center of this lines up in the middle of his hand. So that's why I twisted the vertices. But I'm going to leave it angled inwards a little bit just because it's for rigging purposes, I suppose. But that's more or less how that works. And the next step, adding the details here. I've added the X's on here and the circles on here. The X's are actually really simple to do. I just used a cylinder. So if I grab a cylinder and draw it on the grid, or the ground right here, pull that up there. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. And then go to inputs, 20, I'm going to drop down to 4, so it's a square. And when I take this piece, I can let's scale a little bit longer, and then Control D to duplicate it, and then rotate it. And so I make it X shape. And then I also probably should have inserted the edge loop first. I'll put one there, click on this one, put one there, and then go to vertex mode, grab these, and pull it upwards. And same thing here, vertex mode, and pull it upwards. And then take the whole thing, and then mesh combine, boom. And then actually, because I combined, I have to modify center the pivot, and that puts the pivot back into place. And then I just have to scale these smaller and drop them all over the place. If I press 3 on the keyboard, you can see that it smooths out and looks basically like stitches. So it's just two different pieces added together and just literally just placed all over the place. So that moves there, that moves there. They're not even attached. It's just they're curved a little bit and they're just laid on the surface. And the same thing here. It's basically just a circle. Draw a circle and draw the ring right around it, and then play with the settings until it's about the desired shape. And if you need to go to the settings over here, let's move that over there. So we can set the this to 0.1. Okay, that was probably a bit good at 0.2. And this one could go 0.01. Okay, maybe 0.05. So more or less you get a ring, a little bit bigger. And this one, since I don't need to waste all the polygons to have this, I'm just going to take the whole bottom half and delete that. So it's just the top half, and I'm going to leave the bottom half on this one, but I'm going to reduce this a lot. So instead of 20, I'll have something like 10. And so that's what I did here, that I dropped it on there. I also scaled it a little more at an angle and placed it on here. And so we've got half of that and this. So that's how that was put together. The next thing over here, we have the chest piece. It's basically a square. And then you take this piece and slide it in place right in front of them and start cutting your edge loops in there, which I'll save you the time of actually doing, but you'll cut the edge loops in there and then just take the vertices and move them into place. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a square, and I take the square and I slice it in half and pull the sides apart, and then kind of start moving the vertices up and down to make it look like leather. If I were to smooth this on the 3 mode, it doesn't look very accurate, so I'm going to put that back in 1, and I'll put these in 3. So that needs some work, and so what I did here to fix that, this one actually hasn't done much with it yet, still in that mode. This one, to create this more dynamic shape, where you can see that it's actually shading, turn off wireframe. It looks like the leather is being stretched right here, so it's pulling around here, and to get that effect, and this is just a cap, just a half circle, stuck on top there, so it looks like it's bolting it down there. I'll take this, duplicate it, move it over here. So I take this piece right here, and if I smooth it, it's not quite the same, so I need to, oops, put that back there. Alright, so extrude, oops, not extrude everything. Go face mode first, grab the 2 faces, extrude them. We'll click on scale, we'll scale it in a little bit, and then G to repeat. We'll click scale, scale it in a little bit. So now I've added the extra edge loops, so when I put it in smooth mode, well, hasn't done too much yet. We need to go add some more edge loops. So edit, insert, edge loop, put one right here, and put one right there. Then we'll go to vertex mode. And not those vertices. And then I'll scale these inwards. And then rotate because it didn't quite scale correctly. Alright, and then move that down a little bit. And so now when I smooth it out, we have a little more of a leather shape, and it's starting to hold a little bit of thickness, but it's still not as thick as the other one, and that's because the other one had a extrusion on the bottom as well. So we extrude that, same process, scale it just a little bit in, and then when I smooth it out, you have more of a thick piece of leather with a bit of an upper edge on the top, and you can change the upper edge by pulling up this edge a little bit higher. And to get the stretch mark down there, it's basically going to vertex mode and taking both these vertices and pushing it straight down, and that creates the stretch effect when you put it there. So it's like the leather is being pulled, and so the same thing, it's just a matter of adjusting some vertices. So I created that, and I reused that pattern quite a lot throughout everything else. So jumping over to here, you can see that I just copied it and pasted it and rearranged some of the vertices because it's not the exact same fit. I also put a back plate on them, which is kind of copy and paste and then modify slightly to kind of fit the outside of his shoulders and slightly different. It's not going to have a sharp point here once the geometry is welded together, but that's just how it's looking for now. Alright, so this part, as compared to this one, if I put this back in regular mode, all I did was add some extra edge loops going here. You can either use the interactive split tool and cut around there, or just do insert edge loop and delete out the extra ones over there, and you can create that shape. So by putting those extra close edge loops, when you smooth it, you start to get that sharp cut in there, so it adds a little more detail. Also of note, the sleeve has more detail now, whereas before it kind of looked like the sleeve and you had the stitches on there, but this kind of makes a little more detail to it, like it's actually two pieces of fabric sewn together. So in order to get that result, let's take this over here, duplicate them, pull them over here, and this is pretty simple as well. I went over to the edge mode, clicked on these two, that one, yeah, just the two edges, and then go to edit mesh bevel with the options, and I put down 3 at a 2.5 width and apply that, and it kind of splits it apart a little better. Now I can take both of these edges and then scale them farther apart, and then go to edit mesh, insert edge loop, cut a line across here, and go to face mode. Take both of these, extrude these downwards. Actually, nope, one more. All right, extrude these downwards, and I have to go and weld some of these vertices and hide them. And that part took a bit of a little while to kind of adjust these vertices. But you can see right here we already have a slice in a sleeve right now, probably too wide of a gap right there, but it works for now. So I click all of these edges now, and I would click around his entire sleeve to get the raised part. So I clicked all those pieces and then go to extrude again. Extrude that with the blue arrow so it pulls it all out uniformly. And if I click on that now, you can see that it's smooth. It doesn't quite have the same crease in there, and that's because of the edge loops again. So edit mesh, insert edge loop, and pop an edge loop, not there, right about there. I could probably put another one on the top. That does put a lot of little tiny polygons in there, but when you smooth it, you get a nice sharp edge. So that it's a little bit higher than the other one was, but you get the idea of how you can create this shape pretty quickly. So that all works right there. And alright, so that works for that piece. Jumping on, I added this this armor part that's going to get attached to his shoulder. And in order to get that, I started with the cylinder. And then the cylinder, I deleted off a bunch of faces. So we'll go to face mode, take off these, delete them. I don't need this one or this one, so I'm just left with this piece. And we'll go to edit mesh, insert edge loop. I'll put one here and one here. And then go to vertex mode. And these got squished together. These got a little bit less squished together. And these got moved over this direction. And you can start to see that we're sculpting out that shape based on starting with the cylinder. So relatively simple. That's a little more accurate. And then I also deleted the other half and used the edit duplicate special. This way, whatever I change on the one side affects the other side, so I have that control and I don't have to worry about doing it one side at a time. So then I used the interactive cut tool and cut an extra border around here, so that once I had that border cut in there, I can press extrude and click on these faces, pull that out, and it creates this upper half. And then I duplicated this again and modified the shape of it to create the bottom. So I have two plates sitting top each other, and then again another circle, which we'll go to object mode. You can see that it's just a half circle. It makes it much easier for texturing purposes and UV mapping, so I left it there. And then putting this in smooth mode, you can see that we get a nice smooth result. However, running in a game engine, this backside will be invisible because the polygon is only one-sided. So in order to fix that problem, I had to go and extrude the edges out to create a thickness. So you can see here there's more of a thickness. So taking the edge and pulling it inwards. So I go to edge mode, this one, this one, this one, and keep going around and grabbing everything, then extrude. I guess I'll just do world space. Pull that backwards, You can see I have a little bit of thickness now. G to repeat the last command, go to world space, pull it upwards, and then just start connecting it until it matches the other half. And this way, when you look at it from the other side in the game engine, you're not going to have an invisible piece of armor from the back side. You'll have something you can see because it would have thickness normally. Alright, so that's how that piece was built. And then once the piece was built, as you can see here, I decided it can't just float there magically. It has to be more realistic than that. So in order to make it realistic, I again took one of these leather pieces, copied and pasted it, put it down here, stretched it to fit the curvature of his arm, and then I added these little pieces, which again are just half bolt caps. And then this piece right here is basically just a square, extruded in with another loop right there using the extrude tool. And then cutting a couple more edge loops in there, moving the vertices so it kind of, let's see, this one went down, this one up, this one down some more. And by doing that, it created a pattern that blended with it, and putting it in smooth mode, it makes it look more like the leather is bending and curving around the shape of the armor. So that's how that piece was done. Alright, that should be it so far. Moving on, we're doing the belt section now. Let's close out that. So the belt is relatively simple. It's pretty much just a cylinder, so just making a regular cylinder. We'll draw that on the grid. We'll draw up some height for the belt, and then we'll go to the cap sections. I'm going to put 2 on the cap, and then I can take the edge and then scale that one, and then go to face mode and delete out the entire center. And you'd want to do that to the bottom side as well, and kind of adjust that so you get the same result. I did that kind of quickly, but you get the idea. So once you've done that, you get your shape here, and then this little buckle part was just extruding some edges. So face mode, grab some edges, go to extrude, grab the blue scale button, and just regular extrude and pull the blue arrow. There we go. So that created the belt buckle sitting on there. So undo that. And the pouch right here, which gets pretty detailed, just starts off as a box. And if I smooth it, it's not going to look much like a box. So it needs some edge loops in there. In order to get the shape of it, I decided to use bevel instead. So edge mode, grab all the edges and go to edit mesh bevel. And set a pretty high number, let's say 2.5. Okay, not going to work. Let's try 0.25. Alright, so that works a little better. I don't need 3 on there though, so I'll put that back to 1 and apply it. Alright, and that's what I got here. So now when I go and smooth this on pressing the 3, it keeps more of a square shape. So that's what's right here. And then this part, I didn't feel like modeling it as one solid piece, so it's pretty much just a separate object. And when you put it together, it looks like he's got a pouch that's all nice and neat. To get this piece is pretty much just making another flat piece, cutting an edge loop and then extruding that down, cutting another edge loop and extruding that down, and then adding some more edge loops so we can get a gradual curve instead of a sharp corner, and then pulling the sides in a little bit, and so you get something that looks a little more form-fitting. But I wanted to go a little more detail with that, and so here we have the next step, which is pretty much just taking this first piece, moving these edges a little further in. If I double click this, I can move them inwards. Normally under object mode, object mode, because this piece is angled versus world mode means it's going in the normal XYZ axis. But switching it by holding the W key and holding the left key, I can switch to object mode, and then I can slide this in relation to how the object is turned. So I can slide that inwards, I can grab this one, slide that inwards, and grab this one, slide it upwards, then go to face mode, and grab all these pieces, which I'm not going to grab all of them, but you get the idea. We'll extrude that out, use the blue arrow, and boom. Or actually, I think in this case I grabbed the inner ones and extruded them inwards. Yeah, so I didn't grab all of them on the top, but you see how it created that basic shape so far. And then adding some edge loops in there would give you a more refined shape. So I can have something that looks more like that. And then these things are just half circles put together. And this is just grabbing a cylinder, or not cylinder, an oval shaped ring, and then just kind of squashing it in and going to each vertex and kind of pulling it so it looks turns into a strap. And then this shape down here, to get that more interesting, edit mesh, insert edge loop. I just put an edge loop in here, and then took these vertices on the side and pulled these upwards. So now I have that pattern right there, and then grab face mode, grab all of these and extrude, pull the blue arrow, and it pops it outwards. And so now I have this bottom pouch over there. And then I wanted to make sure I had an extra, I guess, like seam in there, like it's being put together a little better. So in order to do that, again, it's just simply adding edge loops, edit mesh, insert edge loop, drop one right there, drop one right there, and then I can go to face mode, grab this one, and I'd keep going all the way around, except that I don't want to grab these, or this one, or that one, and then go to extrude, blue arrow, pull that inwards, and object mode. I now have that seam that drops in there. So 3 on the keyboard, smooths it, so I would need more edge loops to retain that shape that I'm getting there. But more or less that covers how the belt bag was made. So just a lot of edge loops and cuts in there. And then the last part, in order to get the belt to look a little more smoother instead of being blocky like this, I just put a bevel on here. So if I try and smooth this now and press 3, you can see it loses a lot of the details. So if I put this, if I grab all these and go to bevel options, 0.25 might be too much. Actually, 0.25 works pretty well. So it took every shape, every line on the entire thing, and put a bevel on there. So now when I put this on 3 mode, you can see that it keeps the same shape. Unfortunately, it also put little bumps in here, so the whole belt itself looks a little bent up. So I'm going to undo that. In order to fix that, I selectively picked which ones I wanted to have the bevel. So in edge mode, double click this, grab that whole ring, double click there, and then selectively grab this one, that one, that one, and I'd grab more on this side also. And then you go to bevel, and then you go to object, and that way it only bevels the outer edge. It doesn't bevel all those bumps in there, so it keeps this circle. And this thing I can just have the whole thing bevel. So bevel that, and smooth that, so it keeps that shape. So that's how I got to there. And then dropping that in place, it puts it around the character, so he has more detail now. Then moving on down to the boots area. It's relatively simple. It's just taking the legs and extruding out some stuff. So vertex mode. Let's rotate these a little more straight. And then take this, pull this up to about there. Oops, a little too close. Expand that out. Move these down. Alright, and then go to face mode. And since these are going to bend and squash with the character, I just decided to model them right onto his existing legs. So, looks like I grabbed too many faces on the backside. Oops, face mode. Grab these, nothing above or below. And then extrude again. Boom. Alright, and we have the belt popping out. Unfortunately, it's still going to blend in pretty well and not be the defined shape we have here. And to get that, it's again more edge loops. So go over here and edit mesh, insert edge loop. I'll put one right here. And I'll put another one really close to it. And then I'll go to both of these edges, pull them straight down. And by doing that, it puts a crease down here. His leg continues down into the boot now, and smooth that out. It looks better, but I can also make this a little more poofier. Oops. By putting one more edge loop, insert edge loop, drop that right on the inner side. And so it makes it a little more poofier, and I can also go back to edge mode and scale this a little bit wider if I want. And so it makes that, and do the same process on the bottom, and you get that. And then for the bottom of the feet here, is pretty much just extruding out this little cap right here. So go into face mode, grabbing these, extrude down, pull it down, and then edge loop again around there to create the sharpened heel area, and probably pull up the other points to kind of blend the heel to the toe level so it doesn't pop out too deep like that. You'd want to push all of it back up. So something like that, so the heel rides back up and is flat level with the front of the feet. Alright, so moving over here, adding some more detail in here. This is basically, again, adding some more edge loops at an angle, extruding it outwards, and then modifying vertex for vertex, pulling back and forth. I added an extra little loop in here by manually cutting it in just to add some more sharpness. So when you put it in smooth mode, you can see that it adds a little more of a crease right here, and there's some creases down here. Unfortunately, it's kind of symmetrical on both sides, so when I put it in ZBrush, I can modify and resculpt it so it's not super symmetrical for the leather. Alright, and then the last thing over here was the cloak. So he has more of a drapery hanging down behind him. This way we'll have some interesting effects when he runs around, has the drapery flapping around. For that, it's just the square. It has to have some thickness because, again, in the game engine, if it's completely flat like a plane, it's only going to be one-sided and you won't ever see the cape from the front side or the back side, depending which side it's facing. So I made a box and I added some subdivisions in there, and then I sculpted this out here, which is basically just going to vertex mode or edge mode, grabbing, let's say, these and these. Actually, I didn't add them. Move, pull these out, and you get the same result. And then the next step, I could vertex mode and pull one by one all of these in until I get that shape. But there's something else called a lattice, which is what this is sitting on top here. And what the lattice does, if I go to change polygon mode to animation because it's a deformer, create deformers now, and go to lattice, I can pick the lattice points. 222 should be fine, apply that. And it puts a box around this shape. And you right click on that box, you can go to lattice point. And as I click on lattice point, I can scale it in, and it does a universal change. It blends everything in. So I can scale it this way or that way. And depending on how many lattice points I have, what it does is it bypasses the number of polygons here. So I don't have to grab every one of these things. So it makes a global change. And you can put other lattice points in there, but it's globally changing your object. So if you have a mesh that has like a 1,000 polygons on there and you don't want to move every one of those 1,000, you can put a four-sided lattice on there and then just start sculpting around with it. So that's a quick way of doing that. And then the last thing over here, I pulled this in a little bit, tucked it in there so it would tuck underneath of his armor a little better. And I think that mostly covers the character. Oh yeah, and the last thing was the sword. So we put the sword on here, so the character sculpted, and we have the sword detail right here. The sword is a detachable object, so he'll eventually be able to pull it off his back and swing it around. And unlike most games where they kind of just magically float on your back, I wanted it to be more realistic. So I added a sheath holder that would hold the sword in place when he's not using it, which adds more realism to how a character would go. And in comparison to Zelda, where they have the long sheath that Link actually slides the sword into, the problem with that is that the sword is technically too long and you can't pull it out of your back. So I decided to make an open sheath where it just kind of clicks on there and holds on there, where he could easily just swing it off his back. It's realistically possible to hold it. It may be a little bit loose, but he can pull it out with one hand. So to make the sword, going back over here, turn the sword on, jump over to the sword. Sword's referenced. Alright. Boom. Alright, so to make the sword is basically just using a square and then cutting some edge loops in here. And you want to make sure that when you have this, you have a middle edge that you can narrow down to, and a middle edge here. So I extruded out these two sides and created this, cut an edge loop and an edge loop there, and then took the point and pulled that down from the initial dot right there, pulled that down. And then once that was done, I can take these two edges, let's say this one, and I can scale them together. And that starts to create the edge of the blade. And if I get closer and closer, it'll refine the edge a bit more. And then this part up here, I took the since I have an edge loop cut in here, I can go to vertex mode and grab all of these vertices except for the bottom half. So just grab the upper vertices. Alright, and then I don't want to grab any of the middle ones, so I'm going to unselect all the middle ones and all the middle ones here. So I just have the outer 4 corners, and by doing that, when I press scale, and I don't want to scale this direction because it'll pull it all in or out. If I hold the control key and grab the green arrow, it'll scale on blue and red, but it won't scale on green. And the same thing works here. If I control and grab the blue, it scales on red and green, but it doesn't scale on blue. So it does 2 at once. So by doing this, I now have more of a rounded circle area. Now I can grab all of these, scale this inwards some more, and create more of a rounded handle. And so that's how I got this one right here. The next step, pulling this, going to vertice mode, and pulling these down and kind of rotating them a little bit so I can get this shape. And then taking this vertex point right here and pulling this down so I can create more of a diamond point right there. At this point I don't want to redo all of this on the left side, so I deleted the other half, made a duplicate, so whatever I change on this side will affect the other side. And I kind of sculpted and extruded this out, so extrude again and this scale at different rates to get this shape. And then when I put a smooth on there, let's say 3, it smooths it. And it looks pretty cool, pretty realistic, but I kind of like the outer edges where it's kind of geometric, so I decided to adjust my smoothing. So instead of having just the smooth line right there, I also decided to put an extra smooth line on the upper edge to get that, to retain the geometric looking, angle. And then I also took this and basically just extruded it up, expanded it out, kind of like we did the arms right here, extruded it, scale, shrink, scale, and so that created that. Then the next part running over here, to finish up the sword, I took not necessarily the best modeling idea, but basically a circle, and stuck the circle inside of there, and so that creates this look of some kind of gem in the middle of the sword. So quick and easy, and when I texture it, I can just make the circle one whole solid color, drop it in place, and it'll be perfectly fine. It does kind of waste extra polygon space in there, but it's a quick and easy method. This one is pretty much just like the other circles, it's just a triangle, or basically a square, merging the 2 vertices together, and I can texture that pretty easily and drop it back on the sword so it has some detail there. These look pretty complicated and advanced, but they're actually really simple. All it is taking a cylinder, take one there, and then duplicate it, and then rotate it. And the other one should be rotated also. So I'll rotate both of them. There we go. And so that's all it is. You put this in smooth mode, and you start to get this effect. And that's what I had right here. So I kind of liked how this looked, but then I thought, well, instead of a ropey kind of thick roundish one, what if I added some edge loops? So the difference is between these and these, it's just adding extra edge loops and cutting out some of those that I didn't need as much there, and deleting the whole, not deleting, but setting the segments to 0 on the top, or the caps to 0. So by adding more of these, it added more of a rectangular shape. And so you make 2 of these sets of cylinders, which are just regular cylinders just sitting together, and then drop in place, and then copy and paste all the way up top until you keep getting a whole set of lacing around the sword. And then I played with a couple other ideas. I thought, what if I took an extra circle and put the extra circle inside here? That actually looks pretty neat, I think. Again, not the best modeling idea to just keep stacking lots of shapes together, but it looked pretty neat. Alternatively, I could take, let's say, a ring right here, and I could put the ring inside, and it has more of like a Celtic kind of looking sword design. I thought that looked pretty neat too. And really simple, easy options just by putting things together. And if I take this and kind of put this over top here, now it kind of looks like the gem is kind of like pressed inside there. And again, really, really simple just by combining and overlapping shapes. You can probably get a little more specific with modeling and spending more time, but just overlapping ideas seems to work pretty well. And lastly, we have the shield, the sheath for the sword. So we have the piece square here, cutting a couple extra edge loops, and then extruding out those two corners until I get this shape. And then I didn't feel like copying all the rest of the stages to get to here. This is kind of a complicated shape, but more or less it's the same. Cutting another edge loop down here, pulling that out, and then stretching it so it's a little more vertical. So this would get a little more elongated down here. Cut another edge loop, pull this out so you get these two prongs sticking out here, and then adding some more edge loops and cutting so it has more of a curvature to it rather than a straight out shape, and then going through and extruding into it and deleting out those faces so it creates a hole, and keep playing around with it, and eventually came up with something like that. So when it's all said and done and put on the character, let's turn off these other layers. Actually, it's fit the screen there. So we have a character now. So that's how all these steps were used to model him, from the boots and the cloak in the back, the hair. And at the moment, they're still all individual pieces. I haven't combined anything yet, except for the parts where they got mirrored across. I did combine those just so that they would round a little better in the center. But everything else is, actually the face is all, I did connect that. We'll cover that part later about why I'm connecting these things. And the same thing, but yeah, so except for that one, he's actually already textured, so, or UV mapped, so let's leave him aside. So far we've left off with basically this guy, so he's still separate pieces. So everything's still separate pieces, the armor as connected, but the other half of the armor actually is connected too. And the face. Okay, except for the body. This guy is still separate pieces, so that's where we left off with. He might also be UV unwrapped, so don't worry about him yet. That's the next video. Alright, everything's still separate pieces. We'll combine these pieces later when we get to the rigging, determining on which one's going to get combined where. So yeah, everything's still separate, but it's all combined, or all sitting on top of the same thing. So the next step is to UV unwrap, and I'll cover that in the next video. Hopefully this gave you a rough idea on how a character was modeled and put together. So if I turn on the other aspects, there's the head, there's the hair. So all these different parts between modeling the head, and then the hair, and then the basic body shape, and then the clothes, and finally the swords to create the end result character. Alright, and that should be it for this video.